Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Barry Kostrinsky, president of the Artist Talk on Art, the ATOA. This is our 59th virtual open studio. This is our response to COVID-19. It's been over a year now, and this has sort of served us in many ways. It's allowed us to gather people from literally around the globe and people who couldn't come to our usual location. The ATOA, since 1975, has given live talks on the Lower West Side of New York City at various locations. Presently, we've been at 12 West 12th Street, the First Presbyterian Church. There are plans to go back that are being developed as the church opens up. However, we will keep this format of doing Zooms as well, and we'll sort of run them side by side with our talks, maybe doing live talks once a month and the Zoom talks 4 times a month as we do every Monday. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. All our talks are free. If you'd like to contribute, all the information on how to contribute or get in touch with us is on our website, which is atoanyc.org. Our past talks, as this talk will be a past talk in about an hour and a half, are recorded and they're on our YouTube channel. And you can watch our talks over and over as you like. The link again is on our website. As well, for talks that are to come, our website has a section called Calendar, and you can see what's coming next week. And it goes out to about July, and I'm going to start to fill in August and September, which I already have people lined up for, but I just didn't feel like filling the calendar so deeply. On the other hand, if you would like to present a talk, organize a panel, reach out to me. It's just a question of me saying yes and us scheduling something for a date that works out for both ATOA and for yourself. Tonight we have 4 presenters, Regina Silvers, Carolyn Falbe, Talwar, and Elaine Forrest. Often we do random individuals who want to present, and I coordinate them together. They're never based around a theme when that happens, and I sort of like that. And what I'll try and do along the way as I moderate is pick out themes that are similar or not, and just see what synchronicities come into play. Other times we do have coordinated panels that are around the theme of color, that are around maybe social protest, whatever it is. And I do recommend reach out to a friend, come up with anything you like. It's always a pleasure to have people present the theme and for us to develop it and to come together and share our ideas and our art. I'd like to say use a chat function. It's very easy to ask a question or make a comment. We've developed these talks as much more informal than a standard talk that's maybe at an art fair. So we encourage all the participants, all the audience to participate and to go ahead, ask questions or make statements. They're usually very positive statements. And I'll read them off the chat, but feel free at any time to unmute yourself, to sort of break in and ask a question. It's sort of a nice way for us to open up the artists as they're talking and to engage in dialogue and other thoughts. So I do want to thank everybody in attendance. This is a holiday. This is Memorial Day, and it is Artist Talk on Art. But as I like to point out, without the artists, there's no talk here. So I want to thank all of you for coming and sharing your thoughts. And I think the presenters, there are some presenters here tonight who are familiar with what we've done, and there are some new ones. And I think you'll find this is a very nice sort of circle where artists are going to reinforce what you've been doing and give sort of positive feedback, something that's often missing in the art world and artists only see in an occasional sale, but they often don't get to hear what people think about their work unless they have an exhibit. And even then, you're not always there when people are looking at your work. So we have a nice group for a holiday. Again, we'll start off with Regina Silvers. We will run into technical difficulties. We will fix them. Nothing has been insurmountable. I'm going to do my best to get everything in by 7:30. And I just want to welcome you all and thank you for coming. So Regina, you're up first. Would you like to, I'll just hand it over to you, and you're an old pro, you're a young pro at this, Regina, so I'll leave it to you.
All right. I don't know how to, should I put it on speaker view? Does people see me?
We can all see you. I would say, do you know this, you see the share screen button?
I'm not ready to share my screen yet, though.
Okay, all right, so you're good. We can all see you. People know if you like, you can, on the top right in view, you have your choice of speaker view, gallery view, whatever you prefer to see everybody. And likewise, inside the box for the individual talking, there are 3 little dots. You can always pin that person and you will see just them. So Regina, where are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from my apartment in Gramercy Park, where I actually have spent most of the past year. And I'm very happy to be with you tonight and to share my work. As many of you know, I draw and I paint primarily, and my work really just follows my interests, my life, my passions, and the kind of work that I like to do. I mostly have done figure work and landscape work, and more a lot of sketching from life, and more recently also, not so recently really, political work, my protest work. And I'd like to share my protest work with you tonight. It really started when I moved back into the city after years of living in Westchester, where I mostly did landscape and still lifes and some people. But when I came back to the city, I was looking for a new way to work, and I looked in the New York Times for some ideas on what would make interesting paintings. Here are a few of the first things that I did as a result of that. I focused in on protest work because it was very dynamic, not particularly because I was pro or con or involved, but because just the dynamics of the composition and my love of doing both figures and a little bit of a political interest. I had been a peacenik during the Vietnam War, so I had my share of protest. But I went into the New York Times and I just looked, and I ended up, this was one of the earlier ones I did, and it was when the NYU teachers were on strike. So they're on a protest line. And as I often do, I did a number of pieces based on the same visual information. So these are actually taken from the same little black and white picture in the New York Times. And as you can see, it's the same composition. This is oil and...
Regina, we're not seeing the work yet. Can you share your screen?
Okay, thank you, Fran. All right, let me try to get out of this. I can go back, stop presenting. Where do I do my, a little thing that I forgot, right? Share screen.
Right.
It's a small thing, okay. Okay, here I am. Let's see if I start over, and I will start over. So we're going to start with my 30 years of protest, because it is actually 30 years since I started all of this. And I started with this placard series, which I had just been telling you about, which was, all the placard series were based on images and articles in the New York Times. And this is, can you see it now? Let me get back. The NYU strikers. And there are 2 versions of that here. And there are many more that I don't have. I generally work with a number of studies, and I don't mean small sketches. If I do studies, they may be, and they may end up being the final works. So my studies are very often the same size as the other pieces. And I prefer doing that to working over my work, because it would deaden it if I overworked. So I will do 4 or 5 pieces almost the same, and maybe continue a little bit more on one than on the other. I'm trying to get rid of something. Okay. Sorry. This is another protest protest piece. And it's a mixed media. So there's pastel, crayon, and probably craypas in this piece. And again, I was more concerned with the composition and with the dynamics of the piece than I was with the content, with the context of actual protest. My concern was how do I make an interesting painting and include some narrative, but mostly how do I combine line and paint? And this was another way of approaching it. It was about a rent strike. Then I did this oil on linen, which was 48 by 34. Again, trying to be minimal, combining line and planes and color and getting a dynamic piece of work out of it. This one is one of my favorite pieces probably because it's about Bella Abzug, who was a heroine of mine at the time and who was in some protest marches or some rallies. And I must have done 6 or 7 of these. This one is the least representational. And I still preferred it because it worked better than the ones that looked more like Bella. So again, I was mostly concerned with, the elements of painting. And well, here we go again. What goes around comes around. This was from the 90s, where there was a lot of conflict over Roe versus Wade, which you probably realize is happening as we speak. There were 2 opposing groups that were demonstrating in front of the White House. And I made a painting out of this. But again, at the time, my concern was more of the action and of conveying it simply, quickly, and kind of in a strong way visually. So I didn't even get to put in the text work, on these placards. It was just not the most important thing. It probably never has been. And again, in the news those days, these were women whose husbands were among the disappeared. And I just made a simple, this is a way that I like to work too, is simply and hopefully expressively, and without being too illustrative, so that I never want to lose the essence of the painting itself by having the content take over the paint aspect of it. This is going a little further. I was getting to be a little bit more figurative, and no NAFTA was in the papers a lot in those days. I did a number of pieces. This is an oil on paper. I did a similar one on canvas of the workers protesting NAFTA. And this is another one based probably on the same newspaper article and clipping. But then in around 2005, it became more personal. I met up with the Grannies. The Grannies were a group of senior women who were peace activists from different groups, and they wanted to raise consciousness about the Iraq War. They gathered together and they had what would we call it? Not an activity, but they had a demonstration. And they went to the New York Times recruitment station, and not New York Times, I'm sorry, the Times Square recruitment station, and tried to enlist so that their grandchildren and other people's grandchildren didn't have to die. Well, of course, they were arrested for trespassing, and rather than take some kind of rather than get off without it in some way, they decided to stand trial. And fortunately, they were acquitted. And when they were acquitted, they decided not to disband, but to gather forces. So they and many followers from all of their different groups, and that was the Grandmothers Against the War and Code Pink and the Grey Panthers, just a number of different peace groups. A lot of these got together and they formed the Granny Peace Brigade. And they and their followers started demonstrating, and I became one of their followers. And I was happy to march along with them and help carry their banner. But while I was marching, I was taking photographs with one hand with my cell phone. You know, I was very interested in all of the different aspects. This was the grannies were singing for peace. One branch of them, the raging grannies, would make anti-war songs and sing them to popular tunes so that everybody could really relate to them. And they entertained while the rest of us gave out leaflets at a lot of different demonstrations, often in Central Park, but in different places around the city. This
Regina,
is another.
I just want to say, I love the idea, the title, The Grey Panthers. That is, I mean,
Well,
that's,
that's the actual name of one of the old peace group of the, you know, older people. It was true. Yeah.
that's great. I do want to point out a few comments. You've had some nice remarks made. Wendy List says beautifully layered, and Norma Greenwood, beautiful brushwork. Carolyn Falbe says, I love your color. And Barbara Sherman points out, and it's true, even if you weren't going for likeness, it's unmistakably Bella. You could tell by that hat. And there's quite a, you know, I think cartoonists and artists that reduce town to a minimal number of forms to capture the essence of a figure or a character, it really is quite a skill, very different than doing a Rembrandt portrait, but it is quite a skill in itself to sort of summarize as you are able to do. Robin Halpern says, beautiful and creative combo of color, line, and space. Wendy List, again, very dynamic compositions, which of course you're going for. Norma Greenwood points out, this is strong figurative work. Fran Beeler, you really capture the essential feeling of protest demonstrations with or without the details. Your bright colors, dynamic compositions work so well for this powerful subject matter. Ellen Pliskin says, I feel that I'm actually there. And I think that's achieved because you bring your figures up close. You sort of, you set your figures up close in the space. And Barbara Fushile, profound and very expressive. Yes, agreed, extremely strong. And says, bravo.
Thank you.
Sorry to chop you off, but I want to get to you.
Thank you very much. I am going for the dynamics, and also for the fact that these are not angry women. They're not angry at the crowd. There's a high spirit among them, and I'm glad that does come across. Yeah, I was up to this. This is a more literal the women of the Raging Grannies, part of the women's who, this is a pastel, who often performed, and this was a kind of a ritual. Like on Mother's Day, we would all walk through the park, and they would be singing the songs while we were leafleting and telling people about Mother's Day. And this is the Code Pink Grannies, who wore their wonderful bright pink, which they also used when they went to Congress, and they dropped banners during the Senate hearings of these bright pink anti-war banners. But here they were wearing their bright pink as they were leafleting and picketing and placarding on Mother's Day. Also, we had, you know, a lot of kind of interesting people. This was Vinnie Burrows, who's a pretty well-known actress. She was in her 90s when this was done, and this was to convince the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, to put peace as part of the election peace plank when Obama was running, because this was in 2008. So this goes back to them. And this is kind of Betty. This is Betty Bizarre. She's one of our, like a poster, one of our poster kids. Betty was on everything that I could remember, with her walker and her signs hanging around, and usually with lots of buttons, and a fierce, fierce woman. And I have so many different images of Betty. In fact, these two kind of illustrate the fact that I work with the same image a lot of times, but I handled it differently. It was a lot of experimenting, and it was very exciting. And the fact that I was able to work quickly and do a lot of them worked in my favor most of the time. And of course, this is the 4th of July. On the 4th of July, Norman Siegel, our ACLU lawyer, and I don't know if you can see this whole image of, of Marie Runyon, who just recently died, and she was over 100 at that time, another fierce activist, would read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and we would all join in and discuss and read and have a wonderful 4th of July. It was a wonderful way to spend the holiday. And I did a number of images of both Mother's Day events, which were annual, and the 4th of July events, which were annual. And then I signed up for a class at FIT, and it was suggested that I try it from another painter who said, do this, you'll never be the same, your painting will never be the same. So I went to this comic book class, and I was encouraged to create a story, to create a cast of characters and use them in a story. So naturally I chose the grannies, and I took advantage of just a lot of different things at this point. I decided to use, I'm not very good at Google Slides, I'm sorry. But so I started the story by having my grandson ask if he could come and visit. And I said, well, I'm busy, come later. You know, I have to go out to help with the grannies. So he's questioning me about the grannies, like, what do you do with them? And I'm trying to explain that, you know, we show people where their tax money is going, and we ask them how to spend it instead. And that they often send it, you know, want to spend it for other things than war and armaments and all. And he's really asking me about why I'm always helping them. And I have this black and white section is always a throwback, is that what you call it? Whoops.
Regina, let me ask you. I mean, I see it as a comic book page or as a storyboard. Have you ever gone ahead and actually thought about making a comic book?
Well, that's what this is. This is 2 pages of a comic book. In other words, when you open it up, this is page 1 and page 2, page 3 and page 4. So I have made it, and when I figure out how to finish it, I kind of did not know much about Photoshop and layering and all. So I just wrote in the text, as you can see. And when you trying to correct it, I want to keep it casual and not put in the print, so that I have not really finished it, which is, I guess, my next project. But this, in here is the story about how grannies got together and they decided to enlist. And, you know, here we want to enlist and go away. And she's saying, oh no, my mother will kill me if I arrest them. But they were arrested. And so I'm telling the story of the how they went through this, going through the in being in jail and all of that story, until I get to showing my grandson just the fact that, wait a minute now. Let me get back to where I was.
You know what, Regina, I'll read a few of the comments in the meantime. Omar says, you are a historian far above literary. Picture is worth 1,000 words.
It has to
Barb-
be.
Barbara Fushill, so amazing. This is beyond special. Carolyn Falbe points out, so excited to see someone has documented these women and their important work. And again, artists often act as historians, and photographers especially, when you capture a moment. And certainly, a lot of the groups that you're capturing, that becomes a document, an important document.
Okay.
Carolyn Oberst, I like hearing about the background of your images. Lee Honigman, great July 4th presentation. Ellen Pliskin says, Regina, these comic images are absolutely amazing. It's a treasure of visual images and make up quite a strong page. I'll have to agree. Although I will say your words and your content is overriding your visual to some extent.
That's what I want. Especially on this page that you see, if you see how these, I need to redo it, but I don't want to redraw everything. And I need to learn how, at this point, to have the words on there, but fade in, just be written on a background so that they don't see this is much too formal. And I want the whole thing to have, a more similar, that they should really work better together. So this is an unfinished work in progress, I guess, if I'm going to go back to it. And
Omar points out he loves it just the way it is. He doesn't think you have to refine this.
Well, I can't seem to get it published. I'd love to find somebody to publish it.
I think that's the right way to go. I think the right way to approach this is like, you've made a comic, and this is a unique comic. You got social content, and
well, all I really want to do is clean up the blurbs, Barry, and get them to be more consistent. Like from this one, these which all have, the dark outlines to these which are, like in a cloud, and others which are just written more quietly. I just need to clean that up, and I would consider it finished, because I certainly don't want to do this again.
And keep in mind, Regina, one way to make a comic book page dynamic is to jump from one cell to the next. So you're somewhat separating your cells, but occasionally bleeding into the other cell sort of opens up a little dynamism. Lee Honigman points out a website would be perfect. Get it out to the millions who think grannies sit around and knit. Sandra Indig, the work is so fresh and alive. Love not only images, but the fact that there is content. Obviously, reflection is taking place, stands in sharp contrast to the present. For example, your present in Washington Square Park then and now, called Needle Park. Janet Goldner, this work is great. Congratulations. Carolyn Falbe points out, I'd love to see it at Printed Matter. And that's a very good recommendation. That's maybe,
yes. Actually, I had to redo this. Is a black and white small version to be part of an anthology that was called World War III Illustrated. And there was an issue last year called Shameless Feminists. And they asked me to take this, and I actually did it in black and white and small and vertical. So it wasn't going across the 2 pages. And it was in Printed Matter. In fact, a year and a half ago, the book came out, and the release was held in Printed Matter. So yes, but I'd like to get this larger color version, that's more, it really shows because it's a combination of showing my work. All of these are images of paintings that I did. Like after I showed this, the grannies joined Occupy Wall Street, and there we were on the Brooklyn Bridge. And then I'm showing my grandson the pictures that came out of that. And this is all true. So to me, it's a double thing. It's about how the grannies are part of history. Here they're part of the women's movement, and they joined the march against gun violence when the kids from Florida had the shooting down there. It's a combination of my history and their history. And I'm just so happy how I got together with it. And so that's what the ending is, why I'm saying, I'm busy helping the grannies because democracy is not a spectator sport, and we can each make a difference. And whoopsie. And
Regina, what size are these?
well, these are 8.5 by 14. This is the width of it. And when you close it as a book, it's an 8.5 by 11
Okay.
book. And each of these, I couldn't show it, as a book today, but you have to visualize that this is, when you open up a comic book, this is 2 pages.
I gotcha.
Left,
I
right.
think 4 or 5 more minutes, Regina. Keep
Okay,
going.
well, I'm kind of finishing, yes. And this is the actual current events of the actual painting that you saw in the comic book that I did after the Women's March, where we met in Dag Plaza in the New York City section of the Women's March. And here the Women's March on Fifth Avenue where we proceeded. And this was the first President's Day after Donald Trump was elected. And there was this big march called Not My Prez down Central Park West. This is on canvas. And then this is probably one of the most recent, which is the fist protest from Black Lives Matter when the George Floyd was killed. So that's, and also last year, Christina Massey, who some of you know, started a project when the United States Post Office was under threat. And she started a collaborative project. Bonnie Epstein, who also some of you may know, sent me this to collaborate. It's a folded, it was a folded piece of paper, ledger paper, and all it did was said a chronicle. And so on there, I did a chronicle of the year, and it started with the coronavirus. And at that point that it was happening, that I was doing it, it was the George Floyd murder and subsequent protests. So I did this is actually cutouts from the various papers. And the rest of it is imagery that I got from, looking through the web at the different newspapers. So that was the Black Lives Matter ending. And I think that's about it. That's about it. Am I still sharing my screen? Or did you want to share me?
I stopped it for you.
Oh,
I stopped
good. Thank you. That's great. So
Very
if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise we, can move on.
Regina, I just want to say you're amazing. Amazing. You should do a publication. Come on, stop it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? People like to be able to look at art, read what's going on in the artist's mind, what they're doing. It would be sensational. I just love your work.
Thank you. And now all I need is,
God bless.
now all I need is a publisher, right? And
Yeah, well, what about Rizzoli? What about Rizzoli or Tashin?
well, we'll see. As I said, I just have to clean up. I have to clean it up a little bit, and I will give it another try now.
Well, love you a lot. This is Barbara Fuchile saying, I just think you're one of the best I've ever seen in so many years. And you know what? Let me tell you something. You're very special. Thank you so much.
So much,
Thank you.
Barbara.
Very nice, Barbara. Very nice to hear.
Thank you, Bear.
Eloisa Pomfret says, love your work. Susan Grucci, Regina, always love seeing your work and your ideas behind it all. Aline Mukhtar, bravo, Regina, amazing work. Carolyn Oberst, really fantastic work. Addie Talwar, who will speak third tonight, says, love your work. Lee Honigman, thank you, Regina. You know I love your work. You have a lot of fans.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a good thing. And Diane Churchill, inspiring. I think you're inspiring us all. You're also muting a stereotype that grannies are in strollers, knitting. There was once I got to mention this.
That's me.
I-
Gigi, Barry, you know what Gigi and the Granny stands for?
I was wondering. I'm scared.
Gigi is Grandma Gina, and that's what my grandchildren call me.
Aw,
They call me Gigi.
nice.
So I'm happy to spend my grandma years combating the old image of grannies who stay at home, because even when we stay at home, if we're artists, we're very busy.
Mhm.
Monty
Sure.
Python back in like 1972 once did a sketch where they went to cartoon version and they showed what's going on in some of the streets of London, and it was these grannies going around in groups and beating people up.
Japanese grannies.
It
Beware
was
the grannies.
Uh-uh.
it's just Monty Python at its best in a way. But I think you're showing us, and one thing I've learned, age is not a determinant for exciting,
Mm-mm.
aggressive, and new work. I've learned a lot of artists, and maybe what keeps you going is, and keeps us going, is we keep evolving, and our work matures. And it's not necessarily a vertical line; it's just a new
Mhm.
step, a new
We hope
branch.
so. We sure
Um,
hope so.
I'm going to move on to our next presenter, Carolyn Falbe. Welcome, Carolyn. Nice to have you come in from Brooklyn.
Thank you. Oh, that's going to be a hard one to follow up on. Hi, thank you for having me.
Hello.
I guess I should just get started. Should I just start sharing, or do you want to hear?
Yes, that sounds good. After all, we are all visual junkies here.
Yeah. Let me share my work.
Mhm.
Oh, hold on. Here we go.
Mm.
Let me actually go back to the beginning here. So I wanted to sort of first show an evolution of my work leading up to the project that I'm working on right now.
Oh.
And I'm sorry for there's somebody like outside my building right now. I don't know if you guys can hear living it up. So my work tends to deal with reflecting on historical or current events and putting them into a more personal context. So these earlier works were about being a parent, specifically being a mother of twins. And I'm sorry, it's really distracting. Being a mother of twins, and this first piece, Changeling, was a reflection on, I don't know if you remember how there was George Bush had told us to collect duct tape and plastic to prevent a dirty bomb attack. I don't know if anybody remembers that back in the early 2000s during the Iraq War, because we were all worried about dirty bombs. And I had friends whose parents were sending them like boxes and boxes of plastic and duct tape. And so this piece sort of was a reaction to that, in that I put it into the context of a Grimm's fairy tale called The Changeling, where women were told to hang their husband's laundry around their children's cribs to prevent them from being abducted by elves. So I created these big battle maps based on World War I. And then these came afterwards. They were modeled on sort of landscape or like old battle paintings.
But that method did work because none of those children were abducted by elves, right?
No, they weren't. Right?
Yeah, you
Which
have.
is yeah. But it was sort of this like reflection on the anxiety you have as parents and like how you do these sort of irrational things in these big sort of more global contexts. And then the other flip side of this is like a lot of this work also has to do with colonialism, being somebody who grew up in Canada as an Anglophone, a white Anglophone. There's a lot of reaction to that too. So here it's like everything's very symbolic. During the First World War, which my grandfather fought in, he was a 16-year-old boy. And he was placed on the front lines, and a lot of the colonial troops were placed ahead of the British troops. So depending on how close you were to white British imperialism, like the top of the chain being like English, you were placed on different parts of the line. And for that reason, there were like much more serious loss of life of people living in colonial nations, and specifically in Africa and India. So the animals are actually toys, my children's toys, but they each sort of symbolize different colonial troops. And then the bears and the wolves represent Russia and Germany. So, and then they're in there with the elves. So it's sort of like this kind of way of trying to combine stuff from my own children's, like their playthings, but also thinking about parenting and all of that. And then the work on the right is another work about parenting, but where I was borrowing from Indigenous stories and French Canadian stories I was told as a child. So this idea of like, what is your culture and how that's passed down to you. So these were like a bunch of drawings that I was doing nightly. So some of them they were mostly a various stream of consciousness. So you can see there's like Romulus and Remus. It sort of combines European fairy tales with both Indigenous and French Canadian stories. So the one with the girl hanging off the canoe is a famous French Canadian story about a guy who gets to like paddle his canoe every night in the sky as long as he doesn't take the Lord's name in vain. And Matelot is like a children's song that was sung to me as a child. And then Dodo means go to sleep. And basically it was like at that moment, I just like wanted my kids to go to sleep so I could have a beer. So there is that sort of happening too. So you can see here, like sort of I take a lot of things from my own life and then sort of connect them to things that are happening around me.
I like how you do that, Carolyn. So I often ask an artist, what's the you in the work? And you're obviously, you're dealing with important themes, but you're putting your personal inside of it. And I think that's what all artists do. It's just a question of how you express it. And I also like that you're reaching back into past mythologies. You're dealing with current issues, and you're sort of making your own story from it.
Yeah, and I think the thing with the work on the mother work on colonialism and thinking about like my Anglophone identity being, the dominant power in Canada, but also we frequently talk about how we don't have a culture, and this idea that we created our culture by borrowing, and I wouldn't say even borrowing, stealing from other cultures, right? So this idea of like how we steal these like dominant cultures, steal narratives from from those they oppress, right? And then remake them. So that's sort of like what I've been doing a lot with these earlier works. So this work was more sort of the dark side of motherhood, and this idea of that I was really struggling at the time with this idea of having children that would just like listen to anything I said. Like they took my word as law. And so I felt like I had this enormous power over them, but didn't really have much agency in the world at the time. And I was living in Park Slope, Brooklyn at the time. So I don't know if you're familiar with the neighborhood, but there was a lot of sort of like pressure in the community, like this bourgeois community of like, parenting in a very specific way, and that there was a right and a wrong way of doing things. And it sort of struck me that I was sort of like the leader of my own cult, like my cult being my two children, that I could tell them anything at the time and they would take it without question. And then also how like my anxieties would fit into that as well. So this actually, I got really obsessed, and this is very dark. I got very obsessed with like Jonestown and how Jim Jones developed this like character, like developed this persona of a cult leader, and how his anxiety and related to like his drug use just snowballed into this like horrific event, but that it started from this very idealistic place, like these communes in California, and this idea of creating this like multiracial communist utopia, and how it devolved into this like, the worst massacre of Americans outside of like September 11th, right? There was over 800 killed, including like over 300 children. So this idea, and so it sort of also, I was thinking a lot about Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen by proxy as well. So this idea of like, mothers, how sometimes we harm our children because of our own anxieties, rather than actually, you know, helping them, because we are feeling alone and ill-equipped. And so there was a few things. So the text on these walls is all directly from the Jim Jones death tapes for the most part. And it combines parenting magazines and religious pamphlets I got handed to me on the street, and just old like 1950s look and House Beautiful magazines. So sort of this whole combination of different things. And it also sort of, I think, had to deal with my relationship with my own mother, which has always been, you know, a struggle as well, because she's a very, you know, she's someone who likes to be very much in control. So that resistance to that as well, and trying to sort of like think of myself, what is my position to that? Will I be that to my own children? And then the last slide here is that my kids and I held a Kool-Aid stand, and we sold Kool-Aid in cups with like parenting advice on it. So, you know, this other thing of living in Park Slope is I was always getting unsolicited parenting advice from different people. So it was a way of like delivering them on like Kool-Aid with, and also Kool-Aid being like sort of like the worst thing you can give to your child in now in Park Slope, Brooklyn, because it has so much sugar in.
Well, and also the concept of, you know, you're drinking the Kool-Aid. So
Yeah, I mean, there is that direct connection as well. So this leads to the animation of mortality. So in 2013, my father was, 2014, my father was diagnosed HIV positive. He was closeted, but he had a whole cover story. But my siblings and I at the time already knew that he was closeted because we had found things on his computer. But we felt like, you know, he was living he was married, still married to my mother, but they were living in very separate lives. And we sort of felt like, you know, they seem okay in their dynamic, so we'll just like let it be. Like, as long as they're okay with it, we're okay with it. But he started experiencing a whole bunch of really, really alarming health issues, and would go to the doctor, and because they saw him as low risk for HIV, being married for like 40 years, you know, probably because of his affluence, his position, it took a really long time to get a diagnosis. So he went through all sorts of like really horrible medical procedures before finally getting an HIV diagnosis, but it was he was too far along. So his death very much mirrored people's deaths in the 1980s. So these are, during that whole period of time, I found it really difficult to work because he still was closeted in the community, and you know, there are still family members who don't know about this because he didn't want them to know. He didn't even want his siblings to know. We ended up telling them after his death, but his friends, his like work, like people in his community had no knowledge of this. And my mother was still married to him, and, you know, caring for this man who had been unfaithful to her, and unable to like, you know, tell this story. So I was really struggling with how to like make art at this time because my artwork is so connected to my own personal experience. So these were like the first drawings I had done in
Caroline,
a really long time.
Do you find working with, you know, this personal subject matter sort of helps you deal with the feelings and emotions? Is it cathartic for you, or does it help you sort of come to terms?
Yeah, I think I come from, when I was in undergraduate studies, I studied with Arlene Raven, who was was an art critic a feminist art critic. And she would always sort of talk about like cleaving yourself, like to do these, like make these, like you may work intuitively, but think about your actions. Like, how are your connecting those actions that you're making to parts of your life. So like, why are you making a line this way? Why are you drawn to certain objects? So, and then at the same time, when I was in art school, I was also doing a degree in post-colonial theory. So I was really thinking about those two things, like, what is my position culturally and socially? Like, how do those things also affect the way I choose to do things? So in my family history, like, what is it about my relationship with my parents, or my relationship as a woman, or my relationship? So I've always been sort of thinking about these things. And I think what I got out of that was this idea that in order to make really effective artwork, it has to be very personal, because in my mind, it's the specificity of your experiences that become universal. So while people might not be able to relate to this experience of having a parent sick and die of HIV related causes, they can relate to the experience of like losing a parent to long-term illness, or they can relate to secrecy or stigma, or or disclosure of secrets. So there's a whole bunch of other things that I think that people can glean onto when you're open about. And that's been the difficult thing about doing this project, because so much of my family is still, I would call it, closeted about this. So, and there's also how, is it ethical for me to disclose his status? So that's another question as well. Like, some people would argue that it's unethical for me to disclose this, but, and I think that for me though, I feel it's not just for a parent. Like, I feel as a parent, it's not fair for a parent to, entrust their child with their own shame. So I shouldn't feel shameful for his behavior. And I don't, there's a lot of inherited shame that I think is passed down amongst people who have lost parents. I mean, it's a huge community of people who've lost parents to HIV related causes. And many of them, have a very similar situation to me. So these were drawings that I made while he was still in the hospital, while he was sick. Because even in 2015 in Toronto, which is a very, liberal town, the nurses were not giving him pain medication at night. So he was in the ICU, and I was staying with him to make sure that they gave him pain meds. It was it was pretty brutal.
That's a very, very strong drawing. When you do paint, someone just asked, what materials do you use? What's your medium?
Well, those works that I was doing before, those were I collage and sumi ink and gesso. So I usually use a combination of things, and you'll see with this work coming up, a lot of my work incorporates digital practices as well. So I'm moving further and further into sort of this digital realm. One of the things I really like about working digitally, and you can see there's a work behind here that's digital collage, is that I can cut them up, I can collage onto them, I can scan them, I can incorporate digital images into them, so things I find online. This is printed on watercolor paper, so it's pretty durable. I can paint on it, I can draw on it. And then eventually I'm going to print this on canvas and make it into a painting. But out of that whole process, I've moved into animation, and this project itself is becoming a public art project that's interactive. So like I was saying, I had this really hard time making art. So I just was making these stream of consciousness drawing. And these were I mean, you probably recognize this now. At the time when I was making them, people weren't really recognizing them, but it's an abstract representation of like the HIV virus. So I was making these drawings, and I was cutting them up and connecting them, like they were just on really cheap, like 8x10 copy paper. And then I started combining them with these like old 1950s magazines that I had. So, and then later with pornography. So thinking about like, my father, like I said before, his father fought in the First World War. he grew up in the 1950s with older parents in Northern Ontario. So his background was like very Victorian. And so a lot of like this work that I'm doing about HIV is influenced heavily by his experience of, growing up in this culture where there was a certain amount of etiquette that I find as like, embodied in those like old magazines from like the 1940s and 50s. And then like you can see here, it's like those images sort of get layered on top of each other and scanned. And then I'm playing with them in Photoshop, adding patterns. And then it kind of becomes this pattern of like, making collages, scanning them, connecting them, printing them, connecting them to other ones, drawing and painting on them, scanning them again, manipulating them in Photoshop. Over and over and over again. So you can see how like elements of this, you can see that virus is down here, has been incorporated in here. And some of this actually was like footage that I had taken, like flowers, where I had like taken photos of azaleas around my neighborhood or might have been cherry blossoms and distorted them as well. And then there's wallpaper here. Some of it is, this is a digital print, but you'll see on the next one, you can see this one on the left. I started combining the real wallpaper, and this is on board, as well as with acrylic. And again, and lots of acrylic medium. So it becomes this, what I'm really aiming for is this, this visual where you can't tell what necessarily is digital versus what is drawn or what is painted. And these sort of, so I was developing this sort of iconography about HIV, and that really was only really known to me because I had to be closeted about it. So in some ways, like this work was more opaque. And there were certain things like the virus, like, when you could see certain elements of viruses, like I would have doctors would recognize that, but most people wouldn't. So there were these small sort of this iconography that I was like sort of developing around it, which had to do with aging, because my father being 74, that was another reason why it took so long for him to be diagnosed, is they assumed a lot of the issues that he was having were related to aging. And that's a complicated thing with people who have been living long-term with HIV, because they're now getting into their like 60s and 70s and experiencing all these different health issues. And it could be related to experimental drugs they were on in the 1980s and 90s, or it could be related to aging, or it could, there's so many different things happening, and there's not really been much attention paid to it. And then also just like my father was very involved in the church, in his church. So there's a lot of reference to Renaissance painting and ecclesiastical painting as well. So I was making these, and I felt like they needed to be animated. And so I created this with the help of Brick in Brooklyn. I created this animation. And so this animation uses, my father really loved Jacques Brel. And Jacques Brel's most famous song is Ne me quitte pas. So I layered 3 different versions of the song, the first by Jacques Brel, and then Nina Simone and Celine Dion, all singing the same song. And this is sort of like an animated version of those works you saw before. So I'll just show, it's 5 minutes long, but I'll show you maybe just a few minutes of it, or a few seconds of it.
A few minutes. I know your videos are very interesting.
Oh, you know what? I think I have to share sound. Hold on one second. I don't think I'm sharing my computer sound. Hold on.
I just want to remind everybody, this is ATOA, Artists Talk on Art. We're a 501c3. Welcome.
Yeah.
Ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas. Ne me quitte pas, 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 ne me quitte pas.
Où l'amour sera roi, où l'amour sera loi,
Où l'amour sera roi, où l'amour sera loi, tu seras reine.
ne me quitte pas,
Ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas,
où l'amour sera roi, où l'amour sera loi,
où l'amour sera roi, où l'amour sera loi, où l'amour sera roi, où l'amour sera loi, tu seras reine, tu seras reine.
ne me quitte pas,
Ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas, ne me quitte pas.
ne me quitte pas.
Yeah, let's just stop it right here because it's fairly long. I know you guys have time constraints. But yeah, with the lyrics of the song, one of the reasons why I chose this song in particular is ne me quitte pas means don't leave me. So that was sort of in reference to my father's death, but there's also the one lyric that I sort of pulled out of the song is it translates as I will make a kingdom where love is king, love is law, and you'll be the queen. So sort of in reference to like this closetedness and the idea that love should be law rather than, the other way around.
I do want to read a couple of the thoughts. Addie Talwar says, deeply thoughtful work. Thanks for sharing. Susan Grucci points out, it sounds like a mantra, deep and very moving. Almost had the feeling of Bolero, the way you were building off a small piece and then adding and growing. Omar responds to your earlier work where you said you do collage, you scan, you print, you draw, you go back and collage. And he loves that process and the finished work, powerful, reminds me of the explosions that happen when I do a bad cloth rendering. One other, Barbara Fuchal says, sorry for the pronunciation, love your crazy and wonderful energy. So cool. So very nice. Just a few more minutes, Caroline, if that's okay.
Yeah. Hold on. I'll just get back. I'll get to the project that I'm working on right now. Hold on. Why are you not shrinking?
And
Okay,
I do want to thank you. Often artists who are speaking, you don't know most of us, but you are sharing some very deep and personal thoughts. And you have, and I think that's one of the beauty here, that we can share openly, we can be vulnerable. You said something brilliant early on that we've said because we've noticed it. When you dive deep into yourself, even though you're inside the one, you somehow are touching the universal. There's no question, and if you notice, you were also pointing out the power you have inside your family with your twins. And your next works that were related to your father sort of mimic that by saying the importance and power he had inside the family with you, where he still wanted it quieted and kept in the closet. And you made the point that that may not be his right to do. Your story is to decide to speak or not to speak, and he is part of your story as you are a part of his.
Well, like I said before, I know that there are other people who've lost parents who feel very differently about that, and that there's many people within the HIV community who feel very differently about that too, because like revealing someone's status can possibly put them in a lot of danger. So it is something that I've really struggled with personally, which is why it's been so hard for me to make this work. So this last piece that I'm making, partly because I haven't really been able to be as public as maybe I am with you right now about this experience, I've been trying to figure out a way of how I can learn more and understand my father. And so I've started making this, working on this interactive art installation. And I'm collecting narratives by other people who have lost parents to HIV and also of long-term survivors, so people who have been living with HIV for more than 10 years. And in my pursuit, it's sort of like trying to understand, create a portrait of this experience, but not having to say it necessarily literally myself, because I'm still a bit muzzled by this experience. So this, I'm just gonna play you this. It's a minute long, but it's a 3D model of the installation that I'm building. And I'll give you a brief description of what it's like. You can see back here on the wall, I've got a sensor up here. I've got artwork on top of it right now, but all those little pieces of blue tape are being mapped, so that what you'll be able to do is there's a projector, they're all mapped to a projector as well, and you'll be able to put your hand up to the wall and create these viruses within these walls of projected wallpaper. And then when you trigger one of these viruses, it's narrated by one of these people who I've been interviewing. So this first video is just sort of shows the process of creating the installation, and then I've got another minute video afterwards I can show you briefly that is one of the actual narratives, along with some generative animation. So this is generative animation. Every single time it's triggered, the animation is different, and every single time it's triggered, the testimonial is different as well. So the idea is that this installation will be put in public schools and hospitals and community spaces. And because it's digital, people will be able to actually come in and be interviewed and have their own testimonials put into the work almost immediately. So it can be very site specific. And I recently also got permission from Columbia Libraries to include their oral histories as well. So I'm beginning to think of this project as more as a repository for untold narratives about HIV.
They didn't tell us the truth.
No one talked about it.
The secret is
My
heavy
dad's
on me.
side of the
You get so used to it, you start shutting down.
You have to be on a stage all the time, and it's exhausting.
So that's what it's going to look like. It will be a room when it's finished. Right now, it's just one wall. So we still need to raise some money to finish building it.
They didn't tell us the truth.
No one talked about it.
The secret is
My
All right.
They didn't tell us the truth.
no one talked about it.
Okay. And then here is just an example of one of the testimonials with some generative animation. So this is animation that was triggered by a signal to one of these roses that you see. And then it randomly selects one of the testimonials and through computer code generates an animation.
December 31st, 1993, I was called to the emergency room to draw blood on a patient. She was known to be HIV positive. She was known to be an active drug user with a lot of scarring on her veins. And the nurses had tried to get her blood, couldn't get her. So they sent me in. I asked her permission to draw her blood, and she's like, no, 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 I just want something for pain. I said, look, if they don't do the basics, you're not even going to get a Tylenol. So let me draw the basics and we'll work from there. And I figured once the needle was in, I could get as many tubes as possible. She realized I was going to take the whole bunch of tubes, and she jerked her arm. And when she jerked her arm, the needle went from her vein into my hand. Back then, the only medication they had was ACT. They didn't have post-exposure prophylaxis. They check you. If you're negative, they start giving you the cocktail medication. Take it for 2 months. And the chances of you seroconverting to positive are like 99% you're going to be negative. Back then, there wasn't that. It was cross your fingers and hope for the best. So I tested negative that night, but I didn't have any medication. 2 months later, still negative. 4 months later, I was in the process of converting to positive. I didn't have any symptoms actually at first. I know in the end of January, about 3 weeks after the exposure, I thought what I had was like a stomach virus. I was nauseous, vomiting, diarrhea. So I thought it was just a stomach virus. Lasted a couple of days and it went away by itself. Didn't have a thought that that was actually my body saying, oh my God, what's this? Let's try to get rid of it. And that's when it recognized the HIV.
That's the end. Oh. Yeah, so that's an example. That's a woman who is the only person living in the United States who has her HIV care paid by workers' compensation because she was pricked by a needle. So whereas I think in the 1980s, we heard a lot of sort of nightmare stories about that. It happened very, very rarely. But she just happens to be that one person in the US who that happened to. So that's the project, and it's ongoing. We're still working on it. We're actually on Friday having a preview here in Gowanus to have people test out the sensors. We're beta testing the project just with this one wall to make sure that it's working properly before we start building the room it's going to be contained in. And I think I'm done.
Nice, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Carolyn, bravo. You're very special. I love you so much. I'm Barbara Fuchel. I live in Tribeca. I live in New York. Let me tell you something. I'm a follower by you. I gave my email to this lovely man here. So please take that from him. Get back to me. I really like to talk to you about your work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to speak to you.
God bless. You take care.
Thank you.
I think Alyssa Pritzker summed it up very nicely, using only 2 letters, but one twice when she says, wow.
Oh, thank you.
I think
that means a lot.
Yeah.
Really
Elaine Forrest says the work is sensitive, creative, and multi-layered, very beautiful and most unusual. I particularly like how you went from, a single image to then collaging through several processes and then to 3-dimensional animation. And I think there's you and your imagery throughout the whole thing, but a nice use of contemporary tools as well. Elisa Pritzker also said deep vulnerability, bravo art expressions, brave art expressions. And Fran Beeler, similarly, you are very brave to reveal all these personal, difficult, poignant experiences in your work. And, I'll just have to add, throughout all this, I think one thing that's obvious is your love for your father.
Yeah.
And that's a very beautiful thing. That really is. Annie Talwar says deeply thoughtful work. Thanks for sharing. And I'll open it up to one more question. I do apologize. We're definitely going over tonight. And yes, in the future, I'll probably only have 3 speakers at a time, but I'll probably go over just as well, because you artists, you're not at art for 1 year. This is something that's a part of you, and you have lots to share. I sense each artist that has presented probably in the last 59 talks could present for an hour and a half, and we would not get to the depth of their works. But I will open it up to one more comment if anybody likes, or we can wait till the end and we'll move on to Addie. Addie, I think we'll move on to you. I'll ask you to unmute.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Barry, if there's 1 second, I'd like to say one thing, is that I'm just so impressed with the way you can take something so painful and use it for other people to gain from, and hopefully for yourself as well. And then using the power of art to make something worthwhile out of all of this when it does start with such pain.
Yeah, I think I'll just say, I know you guys have to move on, but I was going to say the most sort of cathartic and healing part of this has been connecting with activists and other people. I belong to a group called the Recollectors Project. So if you know anyone who has lost a parent, we're on Facebook. That's been a really great experience. But I think this, I have my personal work, which actually is like related more to my art, like this art practice that I'm doing right now, which is in response to COVID, and my sort of the behaviors that I see kind of parallel my father's behaviors that I've been doing through COVID, which many of us have been doing, like keeping secrets about our behavior. But with this particular project, I feel like it's becoming something that's bigger than me, that it belongs to like every single person who entrusts me with their stories. And I keep them anonymous. So whereas like my name's on it, but my father's story is not on it, the people who are, it's like almost like I'm again stealing people's stories to tell my own. But I'm really appreciative and indebted to them.
I want to say what Barney said. You show the power of love. That is, is really, it touched my heart, that it's a power of love in all your words, in the work and everything. Like, thank you, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Addie, you've got the floor. Addie, where are you coming? You're coming in from the Bronx, right?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I'm in the Bronx, been here for about 20 years. I'm at the last stop of the D line. If anyone knows the Bronx, I'm at about Bainbridge and 210, that sort of longitude. So I'm a photographer, and a bunch of my work is photojournalism. The work that I'm going to share today is, most of it was sort of shot for a news outlet called citylimits.org. And City Limits has been around since the 1970s. And they came into being when the city was cutting back on funding for various things. And a group of people came together and decided that they needed to have a news outlet that would talk about civic issues. And it's basically investigative journalism and civic issues. Anything that is related to policy, we talk about. So I've been lucky to shoot assignments for them. And so most of it is that, and sometimes I will see stuff on a way to an assignment, and I'll make photographs. So the initial set is, guess where this is. It's sort of landscapes, and then we will get into some portraiture. And then in the end, there is one little treat. So let me share screen. And yes, and please feel free to jump in. The first section, which is about, I think about 6 photographs or so, it's sort of a guessing game as to where this is. And okay, so share. So anyone wants to hazard a guess?
Yeah.
So this photograph was actually done for a story about Indian Point going offline, and then New York City needing to have power. And there is plans for running high voltage lines from the Canadian border down to, so this is in Queens, right? So this is a view of a power station in Queens. The photograph has been taken from Randall's Island in the Bronx, looking over the East River, and that's you know, the power station. I saw, and one can one can go make a photograph at any time of day, but late in the day and early in the morning is the best light. More or less gets interesting. So this was last year that I made my way there. On the way back, it was really interesting because it became really dark. I was on my cycle. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but made it back, obviously. So this is the gritty New York. Normally one gets to see glass towers and stuff like that, right? So, but this is gritty New York. I was actually on my way to an assignment, which was a different assignment, and I saw this, and I just had to photograph it. I was going to be, so anyone want to hazard a guess?
Wow.
Major Deegan before Yankee, north of Yankee Stadium by the Yankee Hotel.
I would say, yeah. So this is a photograph of the Major Deegan looking south from High Bridge. I was walking across the bridge, and actually I was walking back from, because when I was trying to get to the assignment, I didn't have time. On the way back, this is when I made the photograph, and then here's the view looking towards High Bridge. That's a water tower, and that's the High Bridge Park in Manhattan, and that's actually where I'd gone for the event, for the coverage that I had to do.
Oh, wow.
These days, that is clad in scaffolding. They're working on it, so you just see scaffolding all around it with mesh, so you don't get to see it like this. But yeah, it's walking around the city, you always come across interesting landscapes. Let me go to the next one. Anyone want to hazard a guess on that?
That Co-op City?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes. It is Co-op City. This was a story about resilience, flooding, that sort of thing, and housing that's close to the water. This is the Hutchinson River. I'm actually on top of the Hutchinson Parkway Bridge. In fact, I'll go to the next photograph, which was where you can actually see the bridge I shot from.
It's Co-op City.
I don't know whether you'll be able to see my cursor, but this is where I'm standing for the previous photo. This was shot a few years earlier for a piece that was for the New York Times, which was Living in Co-op City. And this one was last year. And again, it's like sunset, right? And this is the typical New York we all know, the postcard New York. This is from Governor's Island, a view of downtown.
I can see my building. I live in Tribeca, so I can
Oh, wow.
see my building. Yeah, I'm on the 37th floor. I'm in Independence Plaza over there. About 5 blocks from the World Trade Center is, so I can see my place right there.
So we have to
Kinda
talk.
cool.
We have to talk, because views from your building would be phenomenal.
Oh my God, you have no idea. The sunsets that I get right by the water are amazing. Anyway, yeah, my pleasure. Listen, I left my email with that lovely man, Mr. Kaminsky. I forget his last name, but just to get it from him, just give me a shout out, okay?
I shall. I definitely shall, because
Thank you,
you'll
sir.
see.
Thank
You'll see why I want to talk to you, because you'll see in the end, right?
Addie,
Yeah, here you. Okay.
Addie, I'd like to sort of juxtaposition of the sort of green space in the bottom right, the very small buildings almost look like pinched tents, and then it's contrast with, you know, the New York City skyline. Nicely done. And I'll read some of the comments. Let's see. Regina Silvers says, love the view of High Bridge Water Tower. Susan Grucci, Addie, you have a terrific eye. Yeah, and at times, you know, you combine a strong sense of perspective on that bridge to High Bridge, the way you sort of channel the viewer in. No, yeah, that one, you know, and then at other times, you know, you're right, you know, sort of taking the early morning light and the, you know, the dusk and the dawn effect. Sometimes the light, the golden light at the end of the day, it really is, it's incredible. It really is.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, and those are actually sort of tents. As you can see, tents and sort of temporary structures. There was some kind of camping arrangement that was going on, that one could camp for the night and stuff like that on Governor's Island. I don't know what, obviously with the COVID situation and all of that, that is not current, I think. But this is not too long ago. This was maybe 2019 when I made the photograph, somewhere in August or something. And this is, if anyone wants to hazard a guess, there is a clue as to where this is in the photograph itself. You'll see a sort of landmark kind of thing that we all sort of recognize. It's to the right of the photograph.
Coney Island?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, exactly. I'm at the west end of Coney Island, standing on top of these sort of boulders, being careful not to sort of get my legs stuck. But this was a story about resilience, flooding, new development, and what we should, you know, different opinions on whether we should be retreating or we should be from the waterline, or whether we should be building in a resilient manner around these places.
Yeah, Adi,
yes.
I just want to suggest something to you, sir. You know, I don't know if you've heard about Little Island, which they just opened up over there on 13th Street and the West Side Highway. Diane von Furstenberg and Ron Perlman, that's their personal scene that they have there, but they say it's amazing. And I'm sure the pictures that you can get from that island, you have to go online and you know, make a kind of an appointment with going on the island. But here it's fabulous.
I think
yes, no,
so.
Yeah, thank you.
It's called Little Island, so I highly recommend. Okay.
Yes, no, 100%. I've cycled past that. You know, last year I was cycling past that, and there's construction going on. And yeah, this whole last year I've been basically normally getting around town used to be transit for me.
Sure.
Now it's been the ferry and my bicycle, and sometimes the train.
Well, good for you, but all I know is this: I hear that's a destination, so I just want to bring that up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Little Island is free until 12 o'clock noon.
Thank you.
Addie, very nice use of composition here. On the left, the way you have the rocks sort of doing your perspective work almost down to a point. And then, you know, that sets up a triangle on the left. And then on the right, the water is sort of like mimicking that triangle. And then you've got the sand being a third triangle. And then, of course, your focus being the horizon line with the two buildings. Certainly the long horizontal format works to your advantage there, but the sharp composition play using perspective.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, yes. This was an interesting morning. I walked around in that area, made photographs. That person sitting on that chair, had a chat with him. He was fishing. He didn't want to be photographed, but it was an interesting morning. So now we sort of transit to another project, which I call Working People. And some of these photographs were made for specific assignments, and some of them just because I was walking by and I saw someone working and took a photograph, because we all have to work. So this is Ruben Vazquez. The photograph here, it was made basically on Jerome Avenue in the Bronx. it was going through the process of rezoning, and a lot of these automotive workshops will not exist. In fact, some of them don't exist anymore. So Ruben and his brother and his dad have owned this muffler business since 97, I have a feeling. I should have noted that down, but I think it's 97. And these portraits are sort of done with the photojournalism ethic in mind, that I'm not posing anything. They're just doing what they're doing, and I'm just spending time with them and making photographs. This is Ruben, he was. This was done last year for a story with COVID, the impact of COVID on the Latino communities and jobs. And this is a restaurant in the South Bronx called La Morada. Nearly the whole family went through COVID. And in spite of the financial problems, they have been cooking and providing food to people for free who are in need. They were very kind to let me into their space to make photographs. So yeah, I went in and just shot a few, and this sort of just worked for me. This is Daniel Hauben. He in fact presented, Barry, if you remember, a while back, not too long ago, I think March, right? This was, I photographed him for a project that him and his wife were organizing, and the Bronx Documentary Center. It was called the Bronx Artist Documentary Project. And about 100 people were involved. I think it was 30 photographers documenting 70 artists. And the photographers went into different artist studios and photographed them working in their work. And I remember when the first meeting happened, I asked Danny if I could come and photograph him, and he said, yeah, absolutely. And it's phenomenal to see him work.
I do want to point out, Elisa Pritzker says you captured a special energy from Coney Island.
Thank you.
I think you also, again here, you're bringing your subject matter up to you, and then you do have a diagonal that brings you back. So you have your composition play in place.
Thank you. Thank you. And I must say this project where the photographers went in and photographed artists at work led to a lot of people getting to know each other. And for me, it's been really inspiring to get to know Danny. Danny's been an artist all his life, and to see an artist work up close and them talk about and share their work, it's always inspiring to me. So this is in my neighborhood, Moshlu Parkway, and these park benches were vanishing. And so the local paper, which is the Norwood News, sort of sent me out. The editor had a chat and he said, why don't you go out and make some photographs of these park benches that are vanishing? So I walked out thinking, okay, what am I going to get, right? You have to go out and make a photograph that's more than a snapshot, that sort of will make a person look at it again. And so the options were these benches that had been sort of cut off the ground. They're the concrete, right? So, and as luck would have it, while I was walking down Moshlu Parkway, I see this gentleman working on a bench, and I got a chat with him, and he was okay about me making a photograph. So he works for the Parks Department, and what they were doing was the benches that they couldn't repair, they were removing and the ones they could repair, they were working on. But in the neighborhood, because initially they had taken away those benches, it caused a bit of a stir as to what's going on. Where did the benches go? And yeah, it was great having a chat with him and watching him work and him letting me make the photographs.
We know where all the benches went. They went with the post office boxes that Donald Trump had removed.
This was prior to that. This was prior to that. Yes, but yes. Yeah. So this is in Inwood, and again, this was to do with the story about rezoning in Inwood, and I had spent the whole day photographing in different sections of Inwood, and this was right at the end of the day. I was making my way back, and I saw this gentleman. He actually is, he has a fruit stand to the left, which is out of frame, and he was cutting some pineapples. And I made a couple of photographs, and he didn't mind that. And yeah, this I just felt the play of light was phenomenal, right? The what was happening there. I, in fact, managed to go into the restaurant and try to shoot him through the glass. It didn't work as nice. This is what worked, and yeah, it was fun. In fact, I need to have a chat with him and find out how he's doing. I haven't, reached out.
Carolyn Falbe points out she loves the contrast between the red and the green. You certainly are a sharp colorist in that last photo. Barbara Sherman as well picks up beautiful colors in this shot. Even, on the far left, you've got that diagonal at the top, and then the light shadow casting below it is a nice place. And again, on your far right, you have a diagonal leading us in that sort of brings your central figure. And it's not the first time you've brought a knife up close in one of your images.
Yes. So funny story, my name Talwar actually means a sword. So maybe there's a connection there, but I don't know. But anyway, yes. So yeah, and yeah, I just find going out and photographing at night, the color of light, is different, right? The LEDs versus the tube lights versus something else. There are these different colors that come out, which are gifts, right? As a photographer, that's a gift to just run with whatever you get. Might not be the easiest photographs to make because of longer exposure and stuff like that, but there's, these are, moments, treasures.
And I do want to read, Diane Churchill says, along with the strong colors that we're mentioning and the composition, she appreciates the human element, which is very strong, and I think is really your motivation for the whole image. I get that sense that these are about the people as much as the color that you use maybe to bring something out in them.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's about the people and what they're doing. It's, so that's why this series that I've sort of extracted out of all the work that I do, it's called Working People.
Let's go a few more minutes. I'm sorry, everybody. We've gone a little longer as usual. We do have one more speaker, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll go through this faster. So this is every May we would have something called the Bronx Day Parade, which was a culmination of the Bronx Week, which was never a week, which was about 15 days or so. But because the last 2 years we are under under this COVID cloud, it hasn't happened. This was 2019. So normally, and again, it's on Marshalloo Parkway, just where the benches vanished, where they vanished. This is still that they block it off, and then they have this Bronx Day Parade, and then they have a fair-like environment after. So this is just one of those photographs. This was done for a story on tax. I'm forgetting the term that was used, but this was shot for tax regions that were the Trump administration put out. Special interest zones, I think that's what they call them. This is in Red Hook, 6 Point Brewery. They allowed me to come in and make photographs. This was done in 2015. In fact, this was to do with the story about Build It Back New York. This was Sheepshead Bay. And the Build It Back New York had this thing about employing locals, the contractors employing local people in repair work and building back the flood damage that had happened.
Are you lying on the ground or bending all the way down?
Yeah, definitely. The camera's on the ground. I'm on my knees, being careful of that skill saw coming my way. But yes, yes, I'm right there. And I was lucky. The sun was streaming in, so it just worked.
I can't stress enough the importance for a photographer to every once in a while get down on the ground and shoot up, or actually to take the camera and shoot straight up into the sky. The sort of unique perspective that we're not used to often yields a very beautiful photograph.
Oh yeah, definitely. Anything that's different from our normal view. So this is again Jerome Avenue. This shop does not exist anymore. It was a wheel alignment puncher kind of place, and they let me come in and make some photographs. I've been down Jerome Avenue a bunch of times, so this was one of the times I've gone there. This is Gowanus, again rezoning, and this doesn't look like this anymore. To the left, these plots, there's construction and there's stuff going on. And again, this is to do with, actually this should have been a part of the landscape thing. It got jumbled up, but yeah. Okay, so this is the treat. This is the last bit. This is a time lapse on Christmas Eve last year from my living room window. And it's been edited to basically endlessly loop. It's about a 40-second piece, but it sort of is done in a way that when it loops, you can't really tell that it looped.
You know, it's funny how the weather vane at the top of the building almost reads like a cross.
Yes. And a lot of people have asked me, is that a church? Then I've done a bunch of these sunrise, sunset time lapses. And it's just amazing the way the light shifts and changes. I just find it amazing that each one is slightly different or very different, and how light works. It's a lifelong experience of trying to learn how light works and what it does. And yeah, it's looped, as you would have noticed. It's looped, I think, once at least. So thank you.
I just have a question. Where was this taken? Where did you take that picture?
The time lapse?
The last one, the very, very last one.
Yeah, that's from my living room window, which is basically looking north. Not looking north, obviously we're looking east.
Okay.
I'm in the Bronx. So
well, I'm in Tribeca, so I get what you're getting, because when I get the sunsets, I face, say, south.
Yes.
West.
Okay.
So I see the water over there. So that when the sunsets are down, sometimes the sky is just so brilliant, so wonderful. And it takes like maybe a half hour before it goes down completely, but it's so beautiful.
I know.
So I share your energy, Audrey. I have to say that to you. It's amazing. Amazing. So God bless you. Keep doing what you're doing. You're very strong. You're very special. Thank you so much for your photos.
Thank you. I'll be in touch, definitely, because I definitely want a photograph out of your window there.
You're
Very
okay.
nice,
We'll talk.
Very nice.
Okay, best. Thank you.
Regina Silver points out the sky is like a moving ceiling. And at times I was holding up my hand to try and just focus on the bottom, because because I really like when those cars move in and out. And then I just wanted to see how it looked just by itself. And I think it's a great iteration of your photography to do sort of a time distillation like that. Lisa Pritzker says, wow to all the presenters. I am going to move along to our last presenter, and I do want to thank Elaine Forrest for being so patient and for all of you for staying around. We're going for a record. That's 2 hours. That's our record is like 2 hours and 18 minutes. We could break it tonight, Elaine. I'm going to hand you the floor, and thank you, Elaine.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So before I put the slides on, I've always been an artist. I majored in art in high school, college, and then I have a degree from Mass General Hospital, Harvard Medical School as a medical illustrator. And I am in a critique group with Sandra Indig and a few other people. And I put together slides because we were meeting during COVID, and of course we couldn't meet in person. And what I discovered was, when I put the slides together, was really my journey as an artist. And so I am going to share my screen here. Here we go. Okay, let's see. Slideshow. And so I'm start. Can you see it?
No.
No. What do you mean no?
Share screen again.
Okay, wait a minute. I have to go back. Oh no. How do I get out of here?
That's
I know. Hold on. End show.
Take your time.
Share screen. Okay. Share screen. Close this out here. No. Shoot.
That's all right. Take your time. You'll get it.
Okay. Slideshow.
I'll just remind everybody, this is Artist Talk on Art. Elaine is definitely, Elaine has figured it out. And I think that was an example of Fran Beeler just says a word. This is the second time.
My magic. My magic.
Okay.
Problems go away.
Okay, since it's so late, I'm just going to flip through these, okay? So this is an example of my work as a medical illustrator. I married in 1967. My first child was born November of 68. My second child was born November of 69, and I got divorced 5 years later. And so I was a single parent. And when I got divorced, I did these cathartic drawings on eggshells. I like the surface of the eggshell.
Wow.
I particularly like this piece because I'm saying that I'm like a puppet, and I've got a child in a high chair, and I'm doing cartwheels. That was what.
That's great.
I think that speaks for itself. My arm was mechanical. I was establishing roots. I also felt like I was just part of the furniture. And this is 2 inches by 4 inches, this little drawing. But then I enlarged it onto a larger canvas, and I've actually sewn this purse on. So I was dealing with certainly supporting myself. When the kids left for college, I did a series on empty nests. Trying to decide whether I would stay in California or go to Boston, New York, or South Carolina, Charleston, where my family was from. Okay, so here are shoes. I spent about a year doing shoes because I had put a piece in an auction, the Venice Family Clinic. It was heavy bidding, and once it reached a certain plateau, people stopped bidding, but they came to my studio afterwards and asked if I would paint their shoes. So these are the shoes that Cher wore in the movie Moonstruck, when she goes to the opera and she bumps into her dad. These were commissions. You can imagine this woman like Stuart Wiseman. I never heard of him before, but there they were. I lined them up and painted them. And these shoes belong to Dr. Arnie Klein, who was Michael Jackson's physician. He helped lighten his skin since he was a dermatologist, and probably gave him a lot of drugs. Yeah. I had a blind date in New York. His name was Jerry. And we dated for about a year, and he said, would you like to come live in New York with me? And I said, okay. They had raised his rent an exorbitant amount, and he said, I want to buy something. So he bought a loft in the financial district, and we were a block away from the World Trade Center. This is my piece for the World Trade Center of the detritus that was accumulated on my deck. I made a collage. Every day I cut the faces of the people who had passed away and recreated the World Towers, the World Trade Towers. But I had originally started the piece by copying the Statue of Liberty off of the license plate, because I thought, oh, I'm going to paint how I felt about it being in New York. And this piece now resides in the museum, the 9/11 Museum downtown. I did this piece called Death with Dignity, and it's a collage. There's actually gauze covering the swan. Well, Jerry is a physician, and he didn't wear long neckties because they would hang on a patient and spread germs. So he only wore bow ties. So each day when he left, I photographed the bow ties. You know, there are many, many more, but
no, go run through them. I like the way you're capturing people in either their shoes or their bow ties. Suzanne Grucci says unique and a great visual diary. Caroline Falbe says, love this so much.
Oh, how nice. That's nice. Okay. I have a lot of slides, unfortunately. Okay, so this was Jerry and the ties, and then shopping bags. Okay, so here are shopping bags. You have to pay a nickel now to get a shopping bag. They always say it's a counter. Do you want a bag? I love the shopping bags because I can hang them on the wall, and they're a great form of advertising. And this painting is 4 feet by 5 feet. It's oil painting, but these 4 pieces are collaged. The last 4 pieces are actually collaged. And when I had the shopping bags, I would hang them on the wall, and I used them as a jumping off point for collage. So, any of these would be great. And then I would take it away and maybe do some collaging on it. This was from a store called Spot. And you could see here's the handle. I just love the handles because you could just hang them up. You didn't have to worry about framing.
Elaine, I do want to say in your last image and in some of your images of shoes, it makes me think of Wayne Thiebaud's cupcakes. And you're sort of like the Wayne Thiebaud of both shoes and shopping bags. The coloration is not that far from his coloration. You have a sort of bright, active palette imbued with light.
Yeah, Barry, I noticed that a lot of my work is really upbeat. I don't really have a blackness to my sensibility. So this double piece, this is a diptych, and it's Sephora shopping bag. And you can see the shopping bag in the middle. And I found them very unsatisfactory just hanging on the wall. So what I would do is I put them on a canvas, and then I would elaborate, take it away. Cancel. My computer wants to go to sleep. Henry Mandel. These stores don't exist anymore. Tiffany's. Ann Taylor. Bergdorf Goodman. It's Good Housekeeping. This is from a trip to China. Oh, and I like to do watercolors. So remember J&R? I don't know. Nordstrom and Lomans. They were so distinctive about the Lomans, of course, it's the writing. So I like to use boxes as a form of drawing. If you have a Tabasco box and it's orange, I see it as an orange shape. So this is one of my box sculptures. This is 6 feet tall. And it's just like an oversized drawing as far as I'm concerned. I think you can get a sense of that. Okay, this is a memorial to the victims of the Newtown school shooting. Okay, and gun control is really an issue with me as a parent. And even today, 20 people killed in Florida. The government really has to take care of this. It's just craziness. But at any rate, there were 26 and 7-year-old children who go down and 6 adults in this incident. Oh, I worked for Chanel for a while. And I love the.
Elisa Pritzker says, Elaine, you have a great, soft and strong energy in the way you present your art. Love it. Sandra Indig, wonderful sense of composition, color, and everything else that makes for really good art. Thank you, Elaine. Barbara Sherman asked, did the people give you their shoes to take home and paint? Or did you slip into their houses and steal them?
No, they actually came and brought the shoes to me. And I just set them up in my studio and painted them and then returned them. So, I mean, people have collections and they consider these collections really dear, like they're special. Maud Frison, they treasure their shoes. Lots of little boxes.
Can I just say something, please? I worked for Barney's for 27 years in the shoe department. I had my own store on Madison Avenue. It was a shoe store called Fausto Santini. So I just want to relate to what you're doing because it's amazing.
Well, it certainly was a strange subject to be painting. I try to get the personality of the person when I painted the shoes. I mean, I've done a lot of shoes. Some woman had her mother's shoes, and I tried to capture that. Anyway, so sometimes I use the boxes for inspiration, or I draw from them. Okay, Jill Goritz showed us her cigar boxes once, and so these are my cigar boxes. Oh, I like this. I cook with wine. Sometimes I even add it to the food. Okay, Dr. Brown soda. No one ever realizes that the Statue of Liberty is this wonderful icon on the Dr. Brown soda. So I explored all of the different Dr. Browns. So these are about 18 by 24, and they're on canvas. They're acrylic and pen and ink. So you have an ice cream parlor, the Brooklyn Bridge, which is my favorite, Central Park Carousel, and the Astor Hotel. And now we go to playing cards. These are 33 inches by 22 inches. Again, I'm dealing with gun control. It says, stop saying AR-15s aren't assault rifles. Guess who? This is a Queen of Broken Hearts. As I started looking at cards, I'm not a card player, I realized you could go a million miles with these cards. So this is a Queen of Broken Hearts. This, I thought about aging, like those queens are so pretty, but they're not going to stay like that forever. This is the Queen of Diamonds. Queen of Spades. Ah, sweets, okay. So this is Dunkin' Donuts, and these are little beads that I've collaged on. We ate all those Tootsie Pops. The oil paintings I do are usually of friends and family. And this is my grandson's lacrosse team. Grandchildren. And this is my family from Charleston, South Carolina. I lived there when I was 5 and 6 years old, and I had a pet chicken. So I've included them as family members. But this is a photograph of me with my chicken.
That's something I'd like to see you paint.
My chicken?
Yes, when you're younger.
Ah, okay, these are some friends, women from my book club. I was at a luncheon at Cipriani's. It's not me. This is not me, it's just a collage. This is my marketing group. I guess half of you is watching right now.
Robin Halpern, sorry, points out creative mind and skilled hand.
Oh, how nice. The still life, a few still lifes I put in. It's the Bow Bridge. This is the view from our apartment. These are wonderful old buildings. This is, these are women who are actually attached to ceramic. I wouldn't have noticed it except when I went to draw the building. I realized, wow, those are people, municipal building. I left this in. So I had this picture of my public school class in 1954. So here we are, we're all wearing white shirts. And here's Mrs. Clark. Well, the miracle of Facebook. Someone posted Mrs. Clark still teaching the 6th grade 11 years later. But look at the audience. I mean, look at the class. They're totally different. They're less homogenized. They're really diverse. And she looks the same, which is like amazing. And I got into the fact that we all wore those saddle shoes and sat behind those little desks. It was a little bit of nostalgia. I also realized that whenever I do anything, I do it, twice, the most at the end. How am I doing? I do it twice. So this is brushes.
You're doing great. I just want to point out, Susan Grucci says you make the ordinary extraordinary. A nice phrase she turned, and obviously she's referring maybe to the Celery series, to the shoes, and to the various objects that you give an up close look to, and I sense you enjoy painting. Am I correct? When I look at this,
well, I enjoy. I guess I do. It's an energy, and I just need to do it. This is a watercolor of a bento box, and this is the oil of the bento box. The lamp that was in my parents' bedroom, which I did a second time in colored pencil. That one was in water, and I collaged the faces in. And these were a few things I did during COVID where I have people in masks. The mask itself. Hemagglutinin, which is really the name of the COVID virus. I did a lot of birds. Birds, freedom. We didn't really have much freedom during the COVID. It's good to be the king. The words food insecurity just rang in my head. I just know that there were people who and food insecurity, you know. This was the storming of the Capitol. I did this piece for Fragile Earth. This is the piece where I let my hair go gray. And these are my Mother's Day colors of the flowers that I got from Mother's Day. The end. That's it.
Let me stop sharing. Very nice, Elaine.
Thank you.
Very nice. And thank you for being patient and waiting, going in the cleanup position. I think tonight we saw, you know, like I said, these are artists that were not lined up in any particular reason, yet I think all the artists had social concerns in here, whether we're talking about Regina's early protests and concerns that probably go back 40 or 50 years, through to all the other artists as well. And so, again, it's an example of artists hitting similar notes and chords along the way, that we really do share similar concerns. And I think you all expressed that very nicely. Of course, all in your own way, in your very personal way. Really was a very nice evening. If anybody would like to make a comment, I will read Barbara Sherman. What a delight, Elaine. Very nice of you to say, Barbara. And Addie Talwar echoes the thought, wow and more wow. So yeah, I think, you know, and also Elaine, in your watercolor, the last few pieces that you showed, there was a very different feel to it than your other work. Your watercolor, I thought it was very beautiful, but I did sense something slightly different than in the other work. And I find watercolor very, very challenging. So I respect that. I am going to sort of wrap up our meeting. I want to say first, happy Memorial Day to everybody, and thank everybody for coming. We're Artists Talk on Art. We're a 501c3. Spread the word. If you enjoyed, come again. If you'd like to tell a friend, spread the word so they can come and be a part. And like I said, if you want to present a talk around the theme, or you just want to share your art, reach out to me. I'm happy. We never say no. We have many interesting talks coming. You can see just about everything on our calendar, on our website. And thanks to the artists for presenting tonight. Thank you all so much. And
Thank
for
you.
all of you who gave us 2 hours of your Memorial Day holiday, probably the only 2 hours when the weather was bearable. So thank you all so much, and come again.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Barry, I'd just like to say something. Can you send me your email or something so I can connect with you, or you have mine?